Okay, so welcome to episode 77 of the Bars Ankle High podcast. My name's Katie.
I'm Garrett. Sorry.
This
It was an
is the
intrusive thought and it won.
this is the weekly ADHD podcast that explores life's low bars with wit and wisdom.
And witticisms.
Um and
God.
we are picking up the discussion that we started last week about attachment theories. I was calling them all in my head attachment disorders, but I guess they're not always a disorder. Is that the
They're
truth?
only a disorder if you really fuck up that attachment. Then
Oh,
you get an
okay.
attachment disorder.
So like you have to be like attached in the biblical sense to have a disorder, basically.
Yeah, Katie. In the biblical sense. It's just like in Monsters, Inc. Oh, God.
I knew it.
I was right all along.
Quick reminder, if you want extended episodes or ad-free episodes or video episodes, join our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarsankle-high because they get all that juicy realness. Ugh.
Didn't like that use of the word juicy, that's for sure. But I guess you didn't like when I said beat your meat last week, so full circle.
You're welcome. But yeah, I guess we can get right into it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors that can increase the likelihood of a child being secure in their attachment.
Okay.
And some
Oh,
of it's going to
okay.
be like the mother being sensitive to the child's needs. Um, Even like the baby having kind of a laid back temperament will make it a little bit easier for parents to like be effective and responsive.
Mm.
Um,
That makes sense because I mean, like, how easy is it for you to get frustrated when like you just can't soothe the baby?
oh,
So
yeah.
like if they're like, and if there's no reason, like she doesn't have COVID,
Right.
she's just fucking pissed all the time.
Yep.
I would imagine that that really like wears on you
Oh,
as a
yeah.
parent or as a
Hmm.
caregiver because it's like going into it every time they're upset, you just know you have to wait it out and there's nothing that you can do to really soothe them. So like your
Yep.
engagement in that event becomes kind of detached because at a certain like you
Yeah.
just get burnt out and it's also like okay, well I'm not getting anything from this because there's
Well,
no
and
soothing for me either, you jerk.
right. And another thing that impacts this attachment is like the state that the mother is in. So like if
Mm,
she's got low stress, her mental health is good, she has good social support, like she can be a more responsive caregiver who is coming from a place of calm, who can help that secure attachment develop. But if she maybe doesn't have a secure attachment style and is anxious and high strung or is really depressed and withdrawn or like whatever it is,
yeah,
it's going to
see our
impact
PPD episodes.
or PPA or depression or um PMDD or any list of things really.
Yay.
um it also says like a genetic predisposition.
Okay, I
Eh.
mean,
Um, and the caregiver's life experiences. So if they've had a lot of traumas and, you know, that kind
yeah,
of
I feel
falls
like
under
that
that
goes into
mental
like
health.
yeah, like if
Mhm.
their attachment style is like super disorganized
Right.
and or whatever, then yeah, I mean, also I feel like that goes to the genetic component too. Like if you're just a naturally laid back person, then either as a baby or as the caregiver, that's going to
Right.
translate pretty well. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Like my baby's been like pretty easy to soothe, which I feel like has made everything easier.
Mhm.
Cause, when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, holy shit, I'm so tired. If you don't have a baby that's like screaming and inconsolable, it makes things a little bit less horrible.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like, have you watched I don't feel like this. Have you watched the, new Disney movie Elemental?
I don't even know what that is. I haven't even heard of it.
It was, like, just released to, like, Disney Plus. You should watch it. It's
No.
actually pretty cool. So, it's, like, the elements, like earth, wind, fire, water, and the 2 main characters, one is water, he's made of water, and the other one's made of fire, and, the the water guy, like, the fire character goes and meets this guy's family, and he was like when they met, he, like, kept crying, and because he was like, "Oh, no. Now I have to write you up because I'm a city inspector, and this is just gonna ruin your life," and he's, like, bawling, and she's like, "What is your fucking like, she's, like, looking at this guy like he's got 6 heads, and then, like, she meets his family, and they're all they play a game, and the game is, like, you say different, like, sweet or sad things, and you try not to cry, and so they're like, "A butterfly, half a butterfly." They're like, say play and this whole family is, like,
And you're
weeping.
like, "Oh,
It's so
I see it
funny.
now." Yes, that's like attachment theory in a
Yeah, I think
nutshell.
you'd get a kick out of it, though. It's actually a very sweet movie. There's a great message in it too, but,
I'll have to watch it.
yeah, I watched it yesterday, like, kind of on a whim, and, it was very it was very good, but the water family is, like, they're all crying all the time, and the fire family is like,
What is wrong with you?
every time? Okay,
Yeah,
sure."
you do this every time? Um, a really great example, and this is my example that I'm giving, so I have seen the show and I know you have seen the show.
Oh, good.
A really great example of a secure attachment is Bob and Linda Belcher.
Oh.
Like, you have this couple who, you know, they accept the family, each family member for who they are. You don't have them like there's no bullying, they're not trying to change anybody. They're like working within how everybody behaves. And there's like they embrace the emotions that come with things. There's a vulnerability that's allowed. Um
God, I love that show.
it's it and you
It's
know
so
what?
good.
Like so I never liked Family Guy
Mhm.
because they were just like it was just like so cutting. Like everybody
Mm.
was like kind of mean. And I watched Bob's Burgers and I was like, "Oh my god, this is like a really sweet family." Like this is a family where they all love each other
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah, that I
sweet
mean,
and
that
like funny.
I'm just thinking of the first episode when Tina's like, "My crotch itches." She's, like, scratching herself, and Linda's like, "Let me see." And, like, the siblings are like, "Huh, that's weird." But, like, they like you said, like, they're not, like, picking on her. They're just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, Tina's crotch itches," and but she's on the grill, and Bob's like, "Yeah, just don't use that hand
Yeah.
to flip the burgers."
There's so many or like when remember when Tina gets really into capoeira
Yes.
and everybody's just like so supportive of it and like Bob has like such
He's,
this
like,
issue with
trying
it.
so hard to like it, and he can't.
Yes. But it's like ultimately they're all still supportive. Like Bob's dream is having this burger place and they're like clearly struggling, but they're all like totally supporting this dream. So
Yeah.
I think it's just like a really great example of a secure attachment that then is like a trickle down to the kids. Like they're making the kids feel like they're responsive and they're listening to them and they care about them and you know their feelings are valid and their experiences are valid. Um, so there's also you know, problems, there's things that can disrupt a secure attachment that can impact that then is gonna cause one of these other attachment styles. So, one thing that can disrupt is, like, the opportunity for attachment. So, if there's a child that doesn't have a primary care figure, kids that are raised in orphanages, um, they can fail to develop a sense of trust that's, like, needed to be able to form an attachment.
Mhm.
So, as an adult, can't trust anybody, can't rely on anybody. Um, the quality of the caregiver. So, when a caregiver responds quickly and consistently, the children learn that they can depend on the people who are responsible for their care. And that's like kind of the core of this attachment issue. So it's not just having somebody, it's having somebody who will be responsible and consistent. I'm
That
sorry,
was
responsive and consistent,
one of the, theories of the problem with that Natalia Grace chick, right?
which I'm going to get to in a second.
Okay.
Before I do that, one of the things that they mentioned was oppositional defiant disorder.
I know what that is, and
Katie
so do
knows what
you if
that
you
is.
listened last week.
Yes. And they kind of have that falling under the disorganized, fearful attachment, but
Yeah.
I mean, disorganized, like inconsistent behavior, um, where, it's like a push and pull dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, if it's real, we're not convinced that oppositional defiant disorder is real.
Right, I'm more convinced that
It's
disorganized
caused by something
attachment
else.
yeah, like yeah, I mean, ugh, gonna get
If you
mad again.
combine a disorganized attachment with somebody that's neurodivergent,
Yeah.
that's chaotic. That's gonna be a chaotic thing
Yeah.
for their relationships. So, um, you can also develop something like conduct disorder, which
Mhm.
you were planning on talking about at some point, right?
Um, I don't know if I had said that I was planning on talking about it. I know that we have mentioned it before because it came up when we talked about, in our medical bias episodes with the likelihood that children of color are diagnosed with a conduct disorder
Right.
instead of a learning disability like ADHD or
Mhm.
dyslexia, because it manifests as acting out when like you can't read what's on the blackboard at the front of the room, you just lose all interest and find something else to
Right.
do versus sitting there and taking notes the way you're supposed to. And so it the we mentioned it, so that was episodes 29 and 30. But it was basically like we were talking about it in the context of medical bias where children of color in particular are more likely to be diagnosed with conduct disorders than something that's like a substantive condition that might actually be what's going on. Oh, you want to see a butthole?
Just to be clear, if you're not seeing us, Katie's referring to her cat jumping on her shoulder. She's not talking about herself.
Yet.
We are bringing back a tier of Patreon, but that one's like $600 a month.
It is. And yeah, it's very anonymized. You'll never be able to match my butthole to my face.
Yeah,
So,
it's like that matching game. You have to match the person to the butthole.
oh my god. So
What could this possibly have made you think of?
so I had that eye appointment yesterday afternoon
Yeah.
and
They
bear
were
with
like,
me.
"Okay, so your 2 eyes, what about your brown eye?"
They
Oh
only
lord.
come in contact lenses. Um, the but it was a telehealth appointment, so I still went to Vision Works and, like, sat in the chair and had the thing in front of me, but there was, like, an optometry tech who was remote and was, like, 1 or 2 and would, like, remotely change the lenses in this machine, and then a
What?
doctor got on and, like, went over the new prescription with me, and, like, they had taken the pictures of the back of my eyes to make sure that I don't have, like, glaucoma or something, and, like, went over those results. So, we're sitting there, but, like, you have to get into a queue to wait for and there was, like, a lady in person who was, like, walking me through all this stuff. Um And so she was like, "Oh, this is like the waiting game, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "Hope, sometimes they hop right on, otherwise it takes a little while." And I was like, and she was like, "So now it's just like some random we were done with the tech, so we had like done the eye exam and we were waiting for the doctor." And she's like, "All right, so now we just got to wait for some random guy." And then she like stopped and she was like, "A licensed person. Like they're
Yeah,
licensed to
not
do this."
not actually like a random guy,
And I was
but,
like, "Are you sure it's not chat roulette and it's just gonna be some random guy in Russia fapping it to me in
you
this
did
chair?"
not say that to this woman.
Yes, I did.
Oh, You use the word fapping in a
Yes.
medical setting? Catherine.
She got a kick out of it.
Well, we have the blizzard here now.
Um,
It's a complete whiteout
it's
outside.
wild.
You know what it reminds me of is, that movie Sleepy Hollow
The one
with
with
Johnny.
Johnny Depp?
Yeah. Like,
Why does it
the
remind you of that?
coloring, like, the
Oh,
cinematography, like,
yes.
everything was very.
Like, muted.
Yeah, I can just see, like,
Or like
snow in the
Twilight.
outlines of the trees, and it's just like,
Yeah, it's super windy.
this
Yeah, it's
windy as
weird. It's still going
fuck
on over
outside.
here, so
Um,
but yeah, so that's what I said to the
that's a fucking wild thing to say, Katie.
she,
Wild.
couldn't finish her thought because she kept laughing at the idea that, like,
I can't believe you
chat
said
roulette
fapping.
would be my eye exam.
That is so heinous.
I am a fun patient. I
I always think that too, and then I make these jokes, but then nobody laughs. And then I just sit there like, well, now I feel like a fucking weirdo because I just made this joke and nobody laughed. Like, I'll come home and I'll be like, I made this joke. And I'm like, am I supposed to be like, did they laugh? And I'm like, no, they didn't. I did, but they didn't. Um, well, that was wild. So we were talking about things
Brown
that can,
buttholes.
I have this window open a little bit. I might have to close it because it's like cold as the Dickens in here.
Ooh,
Um,
the Dickens. Someone's a mom.
the Dickens. That's been this running joke with my spouse and I. Again, this is just like a pointless thing. It doesn't matter, but um he'll say something like, "Oh, I'm cold as the Dickens. I'm cute as the Dickens." And he just thinks it's really funny, but then we were watching What We Do in the Shadows and Colin Robinson's running for comptroller and he's talking about his family and he was his like fake family that he's making up to
Right.
run. And he's like, "I was just the other day having breakfast with my son Christopher. He's 6 and full of the Dickens." And my spouse was like, um, so
Ugh,
that's
I
what I
know.
just
Love
thought
that
of.
show.
Yeah, that's a great one. Actually, I feel like Laszlo and Nadia, that's probably a secure attachment.
Oh, totally.
Um,
Yeah.
because they fully accept the other one for how they are and they don't get jealous and it's not,
And
nobody's
Laszlo kills, Gregor in every lifetime,
everyone.
and just for her.
What was Jelf? Wasn't somebody named.
Well, his name was Jeff in this lifetime, and she couldn't pronounce it.
That's right, it was
So
Jelf,
she
okay.
was like, Jeff,
Um, so anyway, we're talking about things that can develop, if you don't have a secure attachment.
Mhm.
We talked about oppositional. I don't know why my brain has that patterned as occupational.
I don't know either.
Oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, um, is frequently displayed with attachment problems. Speaking of attachment problems, Katie's cat and my dog, who's sitting at my feet. Um, so, if there's something like early abuse, neglect, or trauma, um, or children adopted after the age of 6 months, there can be a higher risk of attachment problems. And even though they're like still in that pre-attachment phase at that age, and let me just like double check that that's actually, well, no, I guess they're in the indiscriminate attachment where they start to show preference. Um, you'll see babies that have failure to thrive just because they're not being touched enough, like they're not getting enough contact. So when you have babies in orphanages and settings like that, um,
Or like, I don't know, Willowbrook or,
yeah,
Penhurst.
yes. I cannot imagine the amount of PTSD that places like that cause.
Oh, for sure.
And then attachment disorders, which is the next kind of portion of this. So, attachment disorders, you can wind up with reactive attachment disorder, which is big topic in that Natalia Grace saga,
Mhm.
which will happen when a child does not form a healthy bond with a caregiver, um, usually the result of neglect or abuse. And it results in problems with emotional management and patterns of withdrawal. Um, so we saw Natalia Grace, who grew up in an orphanage until she was like, what, 5?
4 or 5, I don't know, I feel like it keeps going back and forth.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's, like, a little fuzzy anyway, because she was from Ukraine, and she was adopted into the US as a young child, but at that point had been in this, like, I think knowing what, and we're probably gonna have a Patreon about this, but knowing what's true and
Yes.
what's not is very difficult,
Yeah.
when you're dealing with people just telling their story of
But there
something that
is
happened years ago.
yes, and there is, I mean, at least, even in her case, she for those who don't know, she has a type of dwarfism that really affects her joints in a big way, like, she has a lot
Mhm.
of problems just having like, she's not, quote, "just a, like, squished down version of a fully grown adult." She has, like, very significant joint dysplasia where it's like her knees don't bend
And it
just
it
front
definitely
and
affects
back.
her independence significantly, because her
Correct.
fingers don't all, articulate the way they should.
Yeah, it almost
Um,
seems
like she
like
has fused
yeah, like fused joints or like it's almost like what is like
rheumatoid
severe
arthritis.
rheumatoid arthritis looks like where
Mhm.
you can't bend your hand and your fingers the way that a person without rheumatoid arthritis can do that.
Yeah,
So it makes like holding things really difficult, like a pen, for example. Um, but
or a knife.
my or a knife. My understanding of and just other stories that I've heard of disabled children in orphanages. Now, to be fair, this is probably a huge blind spot in my on my part, but I think, especially in foreign orphanages, not necessarily in the U.S. I don't know what the status is of disabled children in orphanages in the U.S. But at least in foreign orphanages, I think it is very common for the child who's disabled to kind of just be left, and not really interacted with, not given like, occupational therapy or physical therapy to cope with their disability, whatever it may be. So, at least as far as Natalia Grace is concerned, that could have contributed to everything that we're going to talk about on Patreon because woof.
Oh, yeah, crazy story, but, um, even without the dwarfism component, you were still dealing with somebody who was in this probably overcrowded, understaffed institutional setting for
Right.
childcare, which is not going to establish these long-term secure attachment patterns. Um,
Yeah.
because it goes back to that original point. It's not just like having a primary caregiver to attach to, but also like, do you have somebody that's responsive and making you feel secure and safe is also going to impact that.
I mean, yeah. Look at okay, not a real example, but like look at Harry Potter. Like he was fully self-reliant as
Right.
a 10-year-old.
And
Um,
abused and neglected.
right. And, you know, just he was talking to a fucking snake in a zoo, all right? That's not totally normal. I think we can all agree.
Yes. I tend to avoid zoos and the snakes in zoos if I am in a
Don't
zoo.
make friends with boa constrictors because the bar is ankle high.
That's not actually the end of the episode. By the way. There's, I do have more to cover. The other attachment disorder that they list is disinhibited social engagement disorder. Um, which, all of these, obviously, the core of it is like they have a problem forming bonds with other people. caused by trauma, neglect, abuse. But this is characterized by a lack of inhibition around strangers, which can lead to excessive familiar behavior around people they don't know and like a lack of social boundaries, which honestly, like, kind of also sounds like Natalia Grace. Um, I think that
Yeah.
this is probably more common when there's not just abuse, but like sexual abuse.
Mhm.
Um, where, you can have these kids that like don't really know what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And, if you don't have that primary caregiver who's not only like giving you that safety and security, but is also establishing social norms for you, and you can see how they're interacting with other people and how they're interacting with you, you're not going to be able to pattern those normal healthy boundaries the same way that somebody with a secure attachment would.
Which we've also seen again in Willowbrook and Penhurst
Yep.
as a problem where in those cases they're mixing people with severe developmental disabilities and just potentially just a physical disability or people who were committed against their will or after a trial for various crimes committed. But when you have, the lack of supervision by trained professionals allows children to learn the wrong thing and to therefore not understand those boundaries and
Mhm.
understand, my privates are my privates and you don't get to touch them and things like that that like your parents do teach you and
Right.
you do learn
Right.
hopefully in a safe way. But when you have those blurred lines, then yeah, you can end up kind of in those situations where it's like I feel like in a lot of times we hear like the school becoming aware of it because the abused child like reenacts that
Oh, yeah.
abuse on another
Right.
child and that other child's parents are like, excuse me, where no." Like and the mm, more involved parent, I guess I'll say, is the one that kind of like rings the alarm on it, or the teacher that like finds them is
Right.
ringing the alarm on the potential abuse that's happening at home with child A.
And I think that that's a more, like, nuanced approach that's still newer. I feel like
Mm,
previously it would have been, like, a punishment-based reaction, whereas
mhm,
now I think the understanding is, typically are not kids are patterning behavior. They're repeating behavior that they've seen because they're learning. They don't I mean, you don't have kids that are it's like when we were talking about oppositional defiant disorder, and we were like, "Yeah, but are these kids that are just, like, oppositional and defiant, or are these kids that are acting out because they're struggling with all of these other things?" Um, and I think that that's the same thing where it's like, "Okay, so does this child have questionable boundaries with people and displaying inappropriate behaviors because that's how they are, or because that's what's happening, they're experiencing the same thing?" Um So something that you wind up seeing when you have adults with some kind of other than secure attachment, they call them protest behaviors. So they look similar across the anxious, avoidant, and disorganized attachment styles. But you'll see somebody, withdrawing where they're ignoring their partner, not responding to calls and texts. You'll see somebody who's like waiting around to see how long it takes for their partner to call them back. And if it took them, say, 2 hours, then they're going to wait 2 hours before they respond.
mm,
Um, a lot of eye rolling, walking away, leaving the room, um, making comments like, I can't do this anymore. Or like trying to incite jealousy. So, I'm going to flirt in front of them with this person that they hate
mhm.
just to, like, get them going. Um, so all of those types of, like, adult acting out.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I know of a couple that just split up, and it was very much that kind of dynamic, and a lot of the jealousy, a lot of the, like, picking a fight when I know you're at work, So I know you can't really respond right away the way that I want you to respond. And
Mhm.
then doing that, like, oh, so now you're talking to me now, shit, when you can finally respond and like
What an
creating issue. Like, it's just,
exhausting.
that's just it. Like, I was hearing the story and I was like, that's just too much. Like, you're asking too much of me. I can't be granted, having been in an abusive relationship where I was responsible for always answering my partner's calls no matter what I was doing, it is fucking exhausting. It is
Yeah.
absolutely insufferably exhausting. And
Yeah. Just the
it's
amount of,
just the
like, brain space that it's
yes.
requiring from you literally around the clock.
Yeah, because I felt it feels like you're the woman in the meme with all, like, the math going on in the
Yeah.
background, like, because, like, that's what you have to figure out is, like, "Oh, is an emergent like, what if I don't pick up now, like, what happens?" And, like, whatever not. I mean, it's just it's hot garbage, like, it fucking sucks being
Yeah.
the other person in that relationship who's not, behaving that way, like, who's not overtly acting that way, but is rather responding to that behavior. It is exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like it's kinda like when we were talking about the postpartum anxiety, it's a tortured way to live.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
don't live that way if you don't need to.
Yeah. Go to therapy, guys.
Yeah. And stay away from, people with major attachment problems.
Yeah.
Um, uh, unless they're willing to also seek therapy themselves. One thing that I did think was interesting was they actually did this study, at Ohio State, and it
Oh,
involved a
you?
thousand. Huh?
Sorry. I just shouted OU. It's probably not OU, it's probably OSU, I don't know.
I love that you just, like, barreled into school pride for a school you have no connection to.
My cousin teaches there.
I can't wait for them to text you and be like,
The great thing about being from New York is that we have none of this Michigan State of Michigan, or
"No."
Michigan State University versus Michigan University nonsense. It makes me so furious every March Madness. I could not care any less about whatever, Kansas State versus Kansas U.
I'm so sorry. That was such a big joke.
Uh, I just yeah, so anyway, I probably got the Ohio's mixed up, but whatever. It's Ohio, who cares about them?
Can't wait to hear from Ohio listeners. So anyway, the study from Ohio State, they looked at over 1,000 adult Americans, and they wanted to see, and they had them participate online, but they wanted them to see how people who had different attachment issues kind of interacted with the movies and TV shows that they watched. Um, so they looked at avoidance and anxiety because those are going to kind of impact all of the attachment disorders. And there's actually like a little chart. I'm going to flip my thing around so you can see it. Not that it is like really that important, but there's like a chart that lays out like, anxiety versus avoidance
So it looks
and
like a
what type
Punnett
of.
square.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's like exactly what it is. So low anxiety, low avoidance is secure. High anxiety, high avoidance is disorganized, fearful.
Okay.
Um,
That's a good way of thinking about it.
yeah.
Good job,
Um,
Ohio State, I guess. We'll let you back in the
I don't
club.
know if they were the ones who developed this actually, this square,
Well,
but
they're
anyway,
getting credit now.
that's fine.
Congratulations, Ohio.
And whoever actually came up with it, sorry. Um, so I couldn't find where it was. Um, So they looked at that avoidance and that anxiety. So high avoidance tend to not want to get too emotionally close to partners. High anxiety, they're then needy, so like the opposite of that. Um so they had them complete a variety of questionnaires about different, movies and TV that they watched, and the results showed, which is not crazy surprising, that people who were high in attachment avoidance but low in anxiety were less engaged with the stories they watched, didn't really feel a strong connection to the characters. They showed the same avoidance behaviors with movies and TV, that they let me say that again. They showed the same avoidance behaviors with the movies and TV shows they watched that they presumably like do in real life. And
And
then
that's high
those
avoidance, low anxiety.
yes.
Okay.
So that's the avoidant
Mhm.
attachment. Fuck boys. Um, and then those that were high in attachment anxiety were more engaged. Especially the people that were high in both anxiety and avoidance. So like the classic self-sabotagers. They
Mm.
really want supportive intimacy, but then screw it up because they have those avoidance behaviors.
Hmm.
Um, so they said like when people were watching this, it was providing people with a safe place to like deal with that kind of. So it made them like more engaged with the storyline.
Mhm.
Um, the results showed that those who scored high in anxious avoidant attachment style um, engaged with it more in a variety of ways. So it says, for example, they were more likely to say that they were absorbed or transported into a story world. That the stories helped them understand people they didn't know, and that they imagined what would happen if the characters in the shows made different choices. Um, and it made them feel like they knew the people personally. So I think it kind of allows people to have a deeper understanding maybe of their own issues, and maybe it's only on a subconscious level, but I just thought it was interesting that depending on the attachment style depended on how much they were able to kind of like empathize with characters that they were watching.
Yeah.
Um and there was one other thing that I
It makes
looked up.
sense though if it's like that it's kind of like, that thing where, um and
But
I'm
the
sure that
thing
there's
that's
like
where it came from, or so help me.
there's like a psychology thing, but it's your ability to, put yourself in the situation of the characters of the show you're watching
Mhm.
and how that will, like I think it has to do I think I granted, I'm, like, pulling this all the way out of my brown eye, but,
Love it.
um, like,
Which
if
just
you
again, that those $600 tier Patreon members can guess which brown eye is Katie's, just to be clear.
um but it's like if you cry at movies whoa, sorry
Oh,
about that.
yeah.
If
Yeah,
you
yeah.
cry at movies, it's like whether you're crying as, like, an empathy thing or because you're actually, like, putting yourself in that position
Mhm.
of the character and feeling that emotion yourself, um, but, that was incoherent babble,
Yeah.
obviously,
That's
so
been this
you're
whole
you're
recording.
you're welcome.
Um, there was another longitudinal study of attachment styles, and it went over 4 years. 70% of this sample size, which how many does it say how many people were in it? No, why would it ever say that?
Hmm,
Nope, doesn't tell me. Okay. I don't know how many people were in this study, but the the people in this sample set that they were looking at, after 4 years, 70% of their sample had the same attachment style as they did at the beginning, and 30% had undergone changes in attachment. Other studies have confirmed that about 30% of people undergo changes to their attachment style over various time periods. Um, Seeing if there was any other good little tidbits. Hmm,
guess not.
I guess not. Um, Jinx. um,
We just put the ad break at the very end of the episode.
but it's only the outtakes. Um, so that's what I have for attachment style. I just thought it was like really fascinating, especially now, like in this era of gentle parenting, which is constantly getting criticism from older generations especially. Like you're making people soft, and it's like, no, actually, ultimately, based on these studies, you're making more resilient adults who are more independent, more secure, more self-assured, um, and better at interpersonal relationships also.
Yeah. So
So,
suck a dick, boomers.
is that the title of the episode, Katie?
No, it's probably gonna be something to do with my butthole.
That's fair. That's probably a good move. That's probably a good move.
Or like,
Um,
fapping trash roulette.
I still cannot believe. I mean, I can, but I can't. Um, so that was attachment styles. I just thought it was like a really fascinating
It is
topic.
super interesting.
Um,
And
and
I
I
think,
think
like you said, before we went on air and I made you repeat it,
yeah.
because you said it wasn't related somehow. You
I was like,
psycho.
"Oh, this is just bullshit," as I'm, like, getting
I'm
myself
just
set up.
this is just like an FYI. But I do think that it's the kind of thing that you could talk on for a while, and I think I'll probably re-listen to the episode a few times myself because it's just kind of an interesting it's an interesting thing to consider about myself. Like, where was I? Like, what was my attachment style? What was what is Coco's attachment style? Super aggressive, very aggressive attachment style for
Also
Coco.
anxious.
Ugh, so fucking anxious. Yeah, you didn't cover the anxious aggressive attachment style.
You know that one. Anxious aggressive.
um, but to look back on my attachment style at different periods of my life and depending
Mhm.
on what I was going through at any certain time and how that's changed and what I would consider my attachment style to be now. Although I would like to think that I'm at a secure attachment spot. Um, I feel like it also fluctuates depending on if I'm, like, PMSing, so
There's also there is also, like, quizzes you can do online that will, like, tell you your attachment style. I
that's what
mean
I was just thinking of, those fucking
yeah,
anagram tests that tell you your
definitely a
personality.
bananagram, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
What's your bananagram personality?
I do feel like too that your attachment style probably is also heavily influenced by the relationship that you're in. So,
Totally.
um, I think now that I've probably developed a much more secure attachment style based on my relationship and how like we've grown in that relationship because I definitely used to be like the queen of passive aggressive. No, it's fine. And I have to like catch myself because that's like my default is very passive aggressive. Um, so it's something I've worked on a lot. But also like those protest behaviors, I think it's very easy to fall into those. So as
Mhm.
my attachment style, I mean, this is, my armchair analysis, but like as my attachment styles become more secure over time, as I've gotten older, I think that my protest behaviors have m- gotten much better because the attachment style is much more like settled and secure. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, that makes sense to me, but who knows? Um, so that's what I have for attachment style. I just thought it was really fascinating.
it is. Good
Um,
job.
hey, thanks. I was really struggling getting through. I This is one of those topics that is very dense when you're reading
Mhm.
about it, like written in a very dense way. So it just
Yeah.
took me a really long time to like pare things down into a way that was like a little bit more digestible because it was so dense that when I went on Wikipedia and I was reading the page on attachment theory, it had an alert at the top that it's not written in an easy to read way. It was like,
I
"Hey,
didn't
just so you know, like, you may wanna edit this because this is, Yeah.
Wikipedia? I didn't know that they had those types of
I've
alerts.
never seen it before.
I was on Wikipedia the other day because,
What were you looking at, Katie?
the page for, Billie Jean King, the tennis star,
Mhm.
because I was listening to the "You're Wrong About" episode about the Battle of the Sexes, which was where Billie
Okay, yeah,
Jean
yeah.
King played tennis against some old tennis man. I don't know, crusty man.
Some
Um,
old tennis man. Like Father Time with a tennis racket.
I mean, effectively. It doesn't matter because he lost anyway, fucking loser. And, in any event, so I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll just, like, pull up her Wikipedia page," and, because why not? You know, I was at work and, distracted. Her
You
Wikipedia
know the
page,
story.
it goes on for, like, eons. It was a whole, like, encyclopedia of this woman. It was nuts. I
Dang.
couldn't believe how far down I had to scroll. Like, it went year by year of her career, and, like, it was nuts. It was just super extensive.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so her I was like, "This is a treatise on Billie Jean King." Also, she was married to a man named Larry King, but not that Larry King, which I didn't realize. Different Larry King, not the
Kinda like,
reporter man.
when Jiminy Glick was interviewing, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. He was like, "So tell me
Yes.
about your marriage to Richard Dreyfuss." And she was like, "Nope, that's a different Dreyfuss. That's got 2 S's, mine only has 1. Different
Is is Richard
different family."
Dreyfuss a good dad?
Tell me about There's a reason Jiminy Glick has been coming up for us so much lately, but you're gonna have to tune into Patreon to hear about why.
You really are. It's gonna be a good bonus episode when we get around to it.
Yeah, Patreon is where we, ramble about a lot of times shit that we've watched.
Lately, especially,
Yeah.
which I really like because it's like a little hyperfixation corner for us.
Yes.
Um,
That's pretty much what Patreon is.
I mean, our bonus episodes are called Dysfunction Junction, and I feel like that should just clue you into the type of if, um, the previews in our feed haven't given you some inkling of what the fuck we do on our Patreon.
Yes, which we also made an attempt to be a little bit more together looking for this recording. I, for one, watched the video recordings and I was like, "Whoa, that's not a good angle
Yeah.
for me."
I was like, "Yo, I shouldn't be wearing pajama shirts
And
to
I was like, "You know
record."
what I should get? A matching lounge set for myself." So, you went away from the pajamas, I went into the pajamas.
I mean, I'm wearing a oversized sweater and I'm wearing pajama pants, but I'm not wearing a Fair Isle waffle knit, top
It was
anymore.
cute.
I thought so. It was comfy.
Yeah, at least the angle wasn't chin up, because that was my angle because I was sitting in bed. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It'll
we
happen.
fixed it.
At some point, you know, a billion years from now when I'm pregnant and, recording from bed in my 3rd trimester, the turntables will have turned.
And you'll
So
be like, "This fucking sucks." I'll be like, "I know, man. I know it does. I know exactly how much it sucks."
and you'll just be there watching me trying to sit on the medicine ball without falling over.
Oh my god. Sometimes I think back to what it was like being really pregnant, and I'm like, "Oh, god, that was the worst." All of it. We did one marathon day, and I think I died.
Yeah.
Marathon recording day, and I died at the end of it. But I survived this one
Good job.
somehow.
Proud of you.
Thank you so much.
Quick reminder to join our Patreon. I know obviously we were gassing it up pretty good just then, but it's patreon.com/the bar is ankle high. You get ad-free episodes, also extended cut episodes if you want a little bit more chaos in your life. And you get video episodes, in addition to being added to our close friends list on Instagram. And we send out like little periodic Treatos in the mail to you, if you give us your mailing address.
or maybe Cheetos. We don't know.
um, maybe. And
Just how mad would people be if they got an envelope full of just like damp
just one
Cheetos?
Cheeto.
We won't send you a wet Cheeto. Just kidding.
But yeah, in the meantime, detach from what doesn't serve you.
I like that.
Thanks.
And find the secure in all of your attachments. Like
Yeah,
that.
because the bar is ankle high.
Bye.
Bye.